подвиг наш история хранит. Не зря в судьбе олеет знамя, не зря на нас надеется страна. Священные слова «Москва за нами» мы помним со времен Бородина. Священные слова «Москва за нами» мы помним со времен Бородина.
Hello Blazers, NFKRZ, and today we're going into the Russian hoods of Berlin, or not Russian hoods, or specifically I would say Soviet neighborhoods of Berlin. I decided to make a sort of a separate video about it because I think personally it's a very interesting thing that, obviously Berlin was divided into two parts, the west and the east, and the eastern part was under the control of the DDR, which was the Soviet basically puppet government, pretty much. Once again, this is literally the center of Berlin, not very far from the Alexanderplatz Square, which is actually pretty much one of the centers of Berlin right now, and it used to be the center of the DDR part of Berlin. And we right now are going on a street called Karl Marx Straße, which is, a very, very fitting title for a main sort of alley in a communist country. When looking at this looks like it looks like one of these Soviet like old posters where they post when they used to build these buildings like that in Russian cities, and they used to basically have this little postcards that would show how the neighborhood would look in its perfect form. This is why, because Germans actually do keep these buildings in their perfect form. So they do look like they just came off some Soviet poster back from the 60s or something like that. Basically, why this part of Berlin is actually of any interest to anybody or of any interest to me is because it's an ability for us, for Russians, who especially me coming from a city in the middle of Russia called Chelyabinsk, it's an ability for me to check out how the buildings that the Soviets built in the 1950s and the 1960s look like when German people take care of them instead of Russians not taking care of them, because I don't know if you guys have taken a look at what a random Russian district with buildings like this looks like. Doesn't look as good, just saying. Very closely hit home to people that live in post-Soviet countries, maybe somebody who's from Lithuania or Latvia, something like that. Just take a look at this. These buildings are so extremely Soviet, and like when you look at this as well, and this is not even the deep down, we're not even deep down in the Russian neighborhood rabbit hole. You can see this is just like, bro, this straight up looks like my central streets in my city, Chelyabinsk. This is basically the star of the whole street right here. It's a restaurant called Moskva, or Moscow, which means Moscow, obviously. And this is a very, very old Soviet type building. This looks like every single sort of there's these things called in Russia called Dvorets Kultury, which is kind of like it's like every even very small Russian town has a sort of a concert hall in it, and they always have these sort of murals on them. And this entire building literally looks like one of those concert hall buildings, except that for some reason it's a restaurant called Moscow. Now, when actually looking this place up on Google Maps, it said that this Moscow restaurant right here is now a protected site, because it's like a very unusual thing for Germany, obviously, that you have such Soviet buildings in the middle of the city. However, when we looked it up on the Google Maps, it said that this place is now apparently a nightclub. Guys, I don't know about you, but this looks like the most lit nightclub I've ever seen in my fucking life. It better be Soviet themed inside, I wanna go into a nightclub which plays some fucking Boney M, or I don't know, has Soviet flags all over the place. That would be amazing. Stumbled across this very random building. It's closed right now, but when you actually look inside it, they have some old school Soviet type, weights inside of it. Very epic, very interesting. This whole area kind of brings me back to a time I've never been in. And this looks like just one of these old Soviet sort of posters, but in real life. And like, check this out. They have an advertisement for Chatra here, back from the Soviet bloc, Eastern Bloc days as well. And it's still literally on the building. They never took it off. Just, I don't know, just to pay homage or something. I think one reason why this looks to me as if it's Soviet sort of posters from the 60s is because when I take a look at what my city, Chelyabinsk in Russia, used to look like back in the 60s, it used to look a lot like this. You had these same buildings, which we have as well, and I'm saying literally, this looks like the streets where I live. But we used to have a lot more green, you know, a lot more trees and a lot more, just a lot more, I guess, plant life in the city, right? Right now, what they're doing in my city, for example, is that they're actually making the roads wider so that more cars can pass. Here, however, as you can notice, they're actually making the roads more narrow because this whole street, this whole Kamax Allee street, it's actually way too wide. Also, one fun fact about this street, I guess, is that this street used to not be called Karl Marx Allee. It actually used to be called Stalin Allee. Right after basically the World War II ended and the DDR was established, and you know, Berlin was split into two, this street had the name of Stalin for a few good years, which is really, really weird that the street in the middle of Berlin used to be called in the name of Stalin at one point. As you can see right now, this is actually a new building right here, but this is actually a good example of Stalinist type buildings. We also have these all over Moscow, if you've ever been to Moscow, but in smaller cities, only on the main streets they have them. And also you can notice here's a little fountain. I can't really see if there's any, no, there's no epic Soviet imagery on it, but this is also a very Soviet looking fountain, if I'm going to be honest with you. Well, in Russia we would say this is called dvorik. We call this the backyard in Russia. It's because, you know, obviously when you live in a communist building, you don't have a backyard of your own. So when referring to the backyard, we mean basically the playgrounds located near the building you have. And we actually have tables for table tennis. So a very obvious difference you would notice is that the entrances to the stairs of every single building, they're actually glass. They're not metal. Look at these flowers on the building, inside the window. Probably a very nice Russian grandma lives in there. This is like, bro, I don't even know. I don't even know if I left Russia at this point. Like, I don't even know what to title this video, but I'm probably gonna title it like, is this Germany or Russia? Because I cannot tell. So they have mailboxes right on the streets, so that you know, nobody, like the postman, doesn't really have to come in order to put your mail. Because in Russia, so in order to enter a Russian staircase in a commie block building, you have to call up an intercom, and very often somebody calls up your intercom in your flat and it's like, hey, it's the postman, you know. But very often it's not the postman, it's somebody pretending to be the postman, which is gonna probably take a piss in your commie block staircase, which is not nice. And so here, with while having the mailboxes right there, they avoid that. And also, guys, I'm not directly filming any of this right now because there are two very old school German grandmas standing, and they're looking at us like we're insane and like we're trying to compromise their neighborhood or something. So we don't want to get the cops called on us by some very angry German grandmas, so we have to do this very sneakily. Like parking spots for bicycles, which is also a very nice idea, because these buildings, it's a very big issue for people like myself who live in I live in a 5-story commie block building which does not have an elevator. So when I used to be a kid, I used to ride the bicycle. I always had to, as a kid, bring my bicycle up 5 flights of stairs every single time, up and down, if I wanted to you know, drive in the street. And I'm not saying like it's the worst thing in the world. Obviously it's manageable. You can bring your bicycle, you know. I'm not that much of a pussy so that I can't literally grab my bicycle and bring it up 5 flights of stairs. But it's nice to be able to actually just park it right on the streets and not have to bring it up those 5 flights of stairs, you know. Here's another, for example, another dvorik, as I would say, a dvor. Very nice table for, I don't know, for the old people to play dominoes or whatever. I mean, that's what usually happens in the Russian neighborhoods. And also, guys, a classic for any, I guess, post-Soviet countries. People are drying their clothes outside. This is just so... Actually, I haven't seen people drying clothes outside where I live in a very long time. I think people think their shit is gonna get stolen now. I don't think it's that common as it used to be. Here, however, though, in Germany, people are keeping the tradition alive, you know. People are still drying their clothes outside. It's very, very nice. We're just walking in this neighborhood and we see this building right here, which actually has a beauty salon inside of it. And my girlfriend is joking that, you know, in Chelyabinsk, where we live, it's very funny because when you walk down the street, yeah, every 10 meters you're gonna see a beauty salon. That's like all the types of buildings we have back at home. You just walk, you have You have basically places for people to get drunk, or like beer stores, alcohol stores, liquor stores. Then you have a drugstore, and also then you have a beauty salon. That's like the perfect starter pack of a typical Russian neighborhood. And you have all of it here. It's not even changed. Россия священная наша держава. Россия любимая наша страна. Again, we're at another street that's full of commie block buildings, and it's white as hell as well, which is also not typical for Europe, I guess, at all. And also one thing that triggers me, actually, as a Russian, is that they don't have zebras on the street crossings, okay? And in Russia, we have zebras everywhere. If there's not a zebra, you cannot cross it. That's just the general rule when it comes to Russia, right? So it's been ingrained into my mind so well at this point that when I first arrived here in Berlin, I couldn't actually be able, I was like, no, you cannot cross the street there. There's no zebra. There's no way we can pass there. But it turns out they just don't have zebras in Germany, period. On this Karl Marx Allee, guys, and of course, we see the statue of the man himself. Bruh. Very interesting, very epic. Prospect Lenina in my city, Chelyabinsk, where I live in Russia, because if you look at the ground, look at these tiles, okay? This is so Chelyabinsk, bro. This is so Chelyabinsk. Like, I literally have a video here of what it looks like in my city, but this is seriously the same thing. I'm not even joking. There's actually a pretty funny story connected to, you know, just shows you a great example of how cities in Russia are built and thought of in general. You know, we have a lot of these tiles once again where I live in Chelyabinsk, and that is because we used to have a city mayor. His name was Tarasov, and he used to basically own a company that produced these kinds of tiles. And so now the entire city of Chelyabinsk, where we live, is covered in those tiles because it was just a great way for the mayor to make some money and also, you know, to give the city a better look. So, pretty genius. And it seems like my man Tarasov, the mayor of Chelyabinsk, also had some hands in creating the East Berlin, because we literally have the same exact tiles everywhere we go. Hello. Yes, I would like to report some proud moments. Yes, some proud moments has just happened. So we just had a coffee in this random cafe, and what's interesting is that the cafe actually has a little museum inside of it. And this actually used to be apparently a cafe back in the days of the street being called the Stalin Allee. And apparently, according to the pictures in it, there was a little exposition, very nice. Apparently they actually had a full-blown statue of Stalin on the streets, which is really weird because I don't even think back in the Soviet Union there were ever real statues of Stalin. Maybe there were during his reign. However, when Khrushchev, as real Russians might say, came to power, there was a huge de-Stalinization of the country, and if there ever were any statues of Stalin, they were removed. Also, guys, I'm literally shaking and crying right now because we experienced racism in this German cafe, okay? We came and they were ignoring us for a little bit. We were trying to order some coffee, they were ignoring us, okay? I mean, bruh, how can you be racist to Russians, bro? We built this whole shit, okay? We built this whole shit. We're the reason you have these buildings right here. We're the reason you have those panel houses. We built this. We own this, bruh. Sorry, guys, that was a little bit of a communist rage coming from within, deep in my soul. Sorry, that was a bit of a bra moment. And you could just take a look at these Stalin buildings and they're just unneededly epic. Like, this is a regular ass building and have columns and everything, okay? And this is like a clear demonstration of what the kind of policy they had back in the Soviet Union when Stalin died and Khrushchev came to power. That was the whole policy of, I don't remember the name, but it was basically called the removing of unneeded luxuries, of unneeded decorations. So this is pretty much the reason why I went from having buildings that look like kind of like these to what we saw a bit earlier on the street. Okay, we walked down a little bit more of the Karl Marx Strasse, this very Soviet streets, and when you go more and more south, actually most Soviet stuff kind of disappears gradually, which is interesting. I mean, this is still East Berlin, but I guess this is more of a, I wouldn't say gentrified, but just a different area. And you know, we could have gone to the very, very sort of actual Russian, like, borderline ghetto neighborhoods. They're not really ghetto, they're still very nice compared to a lot of most neighborhoods, like in my city, for example. Actually, my subscriber that gave me the iron earlier said that there's a neighborhood very far from the center called Marcan or Matzen, where there's basically only Soviet-type buildings. But going there is not really in our schedule, guys, I'm sorry. And when I went to Berlin, a lot of people were saying how this city is somehow kind of dangerous or whatever. A lot of people told me that I should not go to the east, because apparently it's scary and much more dangerous. We're sort of in the south right now, and of course it's during daytime, so like obviously it's very peaceful or whatever, so I don't really see what's so scary about it. This is technically still as Berlin, guys, you know? There's a guy recording a vlog right now, right in front of me. Gang. Alright gamers, we are out of here. We are out of the Soviet parts of Berlin. We're now back at Alexanderplatz. I don't know if you can see the tower back. You probably can't, but I mean, this is still the Soviet part of Berlin, ironically, but whatever. Hope you guys enjoyed this little excursus into the Soviet-Russian hoods of Berlin. Of course, we didn't go into the actual deep down hoods, because once again, it's not really in our schedule. We have to leave pretty soon, but still, you know, in a weird way, that entire area, it doesn't only just look like Moscow, but in a weird way, it also looks like my city where I'm from in Russia, Chelyabinsk, if they actually took proper care of it. Because the Germans are precise people, okay? Everybody always talks about the German quality, the German effort, just the effort they put into everything. If our governments, I guess, if our city mayors put as much effort into keeping our city not looking abysmal, maybe our city would have looked a lot similar. A lot of people in my comments said that if I want to experience the actual German culture, I shouldn't go to Berlin because there's nothing really German about it. I guess, yeah, it's not the full representation, the proper representation of Germany I could have got, but on the other hand, it's a really interesting fusion of cultures where you can see, I mean, where else in Germany could I go and see stuff like this? Probably nowhere. So this is why this is amazing. But yeah guys, that is going to be pretty much it for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you guys did, please make sure to slap the motherfucking like button. And as well guys, make sure to check out my Patreon link down in the description. It would be very appreciated if you guys supported me. We have a nice Discord community of our patrons, and it would be great if you joined. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Now we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.